3 de marzo hay para el equipo de Ivorypress, para el equipo de la fundación, para mí, hay muchísimas cosas que vamos a celebrar. Primero de todo, que estén todos ustedes aquí, a los cuales les doy la bienvenida al nuevo espacio del Norman Foster Institute y también de Ivorypress, que espero que visiten después de la introducción que hará y de la conversación Edmund de Waal y Hans Ulrich. I would like to welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here today. Many of you have come from different places, countries, from Mexico to Switzerland to Germany to France from California, New York, and many from Madrid to be here, and from Bilbao to be here tonight. So tonight, coming back what I said in Spanish, we have to celebrate the 30 years of Ivorypress. It has been a long trip in a boat that in the beginning I was alone, and later I have the opportunity to share it with amazing team. And today I want to pay tribute to the team who is still here with me, and the newcomers that will help to build a new platform, multidisciplinary, to act in Madrid and for Madrid, but also globally. The second celebration is that the Ivorypress from today will not be an independent company, will be part of the Norman Foster Foundation and will be in charge of the cultural branch, acting in cities and all around a common core, an identity which is focused in the book that I began to develop 30 years ago, inviting artists to explore new ways to understand the printing page and to explore the book as an art form. Later, I published many other books, accessible series, and today, 30 years ago, has been exhibited in many museums in America and in Europe. And I was telling this morning to friends that I felt that I made it when 5 years ago, the book of Olafur Alice Ellison was exhibited several months next to Nefertiti in the Neue Gallery in Berlin. That was my first realization that perhaps I had the path that I was pursuing all these years. And the second was yesterday when the director of Museo del Prado came here for half an hour. I stayed 3 hours. So thank you, Miguel. And also the kind letter that you sent me later. I have to pay tribute to many artists. Some of them already left us. Some of them are here today. Who are the main protagonists, along with the printers, the binders, the artisans who really helped me and helped the team to be today here. And after, you will be able to visit the different areas of this space where you can see the handcrafted work of these artisans, and also another series of books. All the items that you see here has been donated by the family, for our family. So I want to say thank you to Norman, and also to my children who have been behind me during all these years. Excuse me, I am. Yeah. And I also want to I have been all these days having Soledad Lorenzo very present inside me and with the team. Soledad occupied the space of Ivorypress. This was occupied by Marlboro, but Ivorypress is in that area. And she was, in fact, the first client of Ivorypress. It was the first to go to the other bookshop and buy the portraits of Helmut Newton that I was as crazy trying to find to have here in the bookstore, but we couldn't find it. And Soledad established before she passed away a prize, and the first prize was, we have the privilege to receive it, the prize of publication and collectionism. And it was given to the project we developed with Edmund de Waal. So the circle, as Valérie Marboul said this morning, the circle has been closed. It's a great coincidence that we are in this space, that here is Edmund presenting also tomorrow and signing the book on archive, and also in Spanish, Un Archivo. And was Soledad Lorenzo who gave us the prize to your book that you will be able also to see here. So Edmund is going to talk to you about his view of books and archives and what the meanings of archives. And after we'll have a conversation with Hans Ulrich. Hans is my pal in the Serpentine. He's the director, artistic director of the Serpentine, and has put the Serpentine up there as the #1 institution for avant-garde art, and we are in debt with him to be able to be living constantly in a constant in creation, in place, and he's able to do so many things that nobody can understand, that you will see next year when we present the catalogue raisonné of his career here in Ivorypress and published by Ivorypress. I want also to thank you as both of you for being here, and also to the Presidenta del Consejo de Estado, Carmen Calvo, for being here tonight with us. Thank you, Carmen. Well, now is your turn.
Good. I have to say, this is pretty frightening. You're all wonderful, but seeing so many of you in one place is deeply intimidating. Luckily, there are soft cushions here in front of me. Thank you, Elena. Thank you for this extraordinary moment to be here to celebrate with you the world of books and spaces and archives. This is a very special moment for me. It's a moment when this book that we have spent the last couple of years working on has just been printed here and published. A book which takes my life in archives, my obsessional, ridiculous life, where I found myself time after time after time, hour, day, week, and year, in spaces, in family houses, in cities, in museums, in the houses of artists and poets, walking down streets in order to try and find what the word archive really means. So I'm going to start with you this evening, and unfortunately I don't have a watch, so I'm sorry, I have no idea how long you're going to be sitting here. Possibly a year. We start in the Parc Monceau in Paris. It's a spring morning, not unlike a morning here in Madrid. You're on the threshold of spring, but you don't quite know whether it's going to rain, and the Parisians are running past you terribly fast on their morning runs, and they're chatting away on their mobile phones, and those dreadful Parisian dogs are rushing everywhere. And you're sitting on a bench in this beautiful park, and you are me, because this is the place, the site, the city, the vicinity, the area where my family in Paris starts. So you get off the bench and you walk with me down through those enormous black gold gates which open up in the Avenue Reisedal. You go down to the Rue de Monceau and you turn left. And you go 5 houses up, and there at number 63 is the Musée Nissim de Camondo. It's this huge, great door. And you ring the bell, and you wait for someone to answer and let you in. And they do. And you cross that beautiful paved courtyard, and you go up to this house of golden stone, this vision of a Petit Trianon, built in 1912 by a cousin of your grandmother's, by this Jewish financier, this family, the Camondo, who have come from Constantinople and built this house because they are Parisian. And you go in, and the door opens, and you're met and greeted by a curator, and then you're in an extraordinary house, a house which is full of 18th century furniture, extraordinary boiserie, Gobelin tapestries. You walk across great carpets, and there are paintings from the 18th century, from the Enlightenment. Every single piece of silver, every single piece of porcelain, and God help me, I know every single piece of porcelain in that building. If we had another year, I'd walk you through all of that, but luckily we don't. And you pass all of that extraordinary family collection, and you ignore it, because there's another door. And if you go up that staircase, it's a metal staircase, open treads, it's noisy, it's got an astonishing acoustic to it, all the way up to the servants' quarters, to the attics. And a door opens, and you're in archives. You're in a dusty series of rooms. And every single room that you open has something different. One room you open and it has Louis XV furniture covered in dust cloths. You open another cupboard, which is in a valet's room, and it has furniture, and it has suitcases that were left behind in 1930, a whole room of suitcases. And then there is a room which is full of banking records, another one of photographs. And there, up in that top room, is an ancient person, a wonderful woman who has spent 35 years, 40 years, sifting through the family archives, and she lays them out. She produces letters from Proust. She produces the wills, the memoranda, every single meal that this Jewish family had over the 40 years in this extraordinary house, where everyone sat at dinner, and what wines were served, and what museum directors were given on the days that they were allowed to come round to choose objects for the Louvre. And there are whole dossiers full of the descriptions of their shooting parties. There are the copies of the wills. There are copies of the marriage settlements. There is all this dusty settling of a whole family into boxes and archives. And you pick one up, and each single piece of paper, you know this, every single piece of paper has a different weight to it. Every single piece of paper has a different smell to it. And you wonder, as you sift through all these objects, all these memories, all these traces, and this is the word we'll come back to, traces. Who was the last person to write this? Why was this thing here? Why is this archived? And then you come to 4 small cards on cardboard. 4 small cards, smaller than this book, as big as a tiny little filing card. And those are the records of the 4 family members, Beatrice and Leon Reinach, who lived in this house, and their 2 children. And the dates that they were arrested in 1940, the dates they were taken to Drancy concentration camp, and the dates that they went to Auschwitz. So how does an archive work? How do you understand what it is to be in a space where there is so much material memory, so much of a record of a collecting family, of a dynasty, of a family who decided that they needed to be in this city and wanted to be Parisian, just like my family in Vienna came from Odessa, same time, and became Viennese, became loyal members of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But when you're in the archive, what is happening with these records? Everything is in place. Those Sèvres vases stand there, and they are exactly as Moïse de Camondo wanted them. Those Fragonard pictures are there, the bed hangings, everything is in place, nothing is touched. And it is an archive, but it is an archive in a way that we have to understand archives, which it is not a place of settlement. This isn't a place where things are kept safe. This is a place where things are profoundly unsafe. How long have they been there? And what do they tell us about why we keep things? Who are we keeping them for? Archives in my life are complicated, and I am drawn to them. I'm drawn to them as places of origin, trying to understand where things happen. Not history in its biggest sense. I'm not a historian. I'm a maker. I work with the world through my hands and my touch. So when I'm going to a place and trying to understand what its meaning is, and it can be Jingdezhen, the city of porcelain in China, where porcelain begins, and where I have to spend time picking up broken objects and looking at records of pots sent to the emperor in the 17th century, and I'm trying to understand what's going on. It can be down the Via Fondazza in Bologna, where I spend a week in Morandi's studio tracing all those wonderful pencil marks where he moved one pot and then another pot and then a tin can in order to see where the light came on an April day and why it was different the following month. Those traces, those marks are archives. Or it can be waking up in Gaeta, where Said Twombly lived, and spending those early hours of the day walking through the lemon groves of his house there, looking at the sea. Or it can be institutional and difficult. And luckily, this isn't being recorded. For instance...
Is recorded.
Too late. After my book on my family and Vienna was published 15 years ago, and some of you have read it, I get an invitation from Vienna. It's in 2 parts. One, would I make an installation for this beautiful temple, the Theseus temple, the Theseus temple on the Ringstrasse. You might know it. It's opposite the Kunsthistorische Museum. It's a small Doric temple. It's what they use for contemporary art. And what do I do? What do I bring back to Vienna? What archive can I use as a resource to try and unsettle my own sense of place? So what I do is I make 2 vitrines, 2 glass cases. That's what I do. And I make 264 very small white vessels, small porcelain vessels. And I arrange them in these vitrines. And it's a memory of a poem by Paul Celan, the great poet born in Berdichev, speaks German, cannot understand how he can make German work as the language of poetry, and writes a poem called Lichtzwang, Light Duress. So I make this installation, which is a poem, and I write the poem on the walls. And for 6 months, people come in because it rains in Vienna, and where will you go in the park? And there's some drunks and some children in perambulators, and you can take your coffee in, and the critics hate it in Vienna, which is a mark of enormous respect, and one I love deeply. Perhaps we can talk about that too. But that's the beginning of me trying to bring something back, which is a different kind of mapping of an archive. And then when that finishes, there is the call from the Kunsthistorische Museum. Will you work from the collection? Will you make something for us? Will you do something with us? Ed Rouchet had done a project the year before and chosen all his favorite objects, and it was beautiful, extraordinary, lambent series of objects and pictures. What do I do after Ed Rouchet? What can I do in the Kunsthistorische Museum? What can I do because I have spent so many years in the archives of my family and know that the day after the Anschluss, that the director of the Kunsthistorische Museum appears at my family's door and chooses which pictures to take off the walls. So there are memories. And so I say to the curators of this wonderful museum, I'm only going to show broken things from your collection. And there is a silence in the museum that you have never experienced before. And I choose broken objects from the stores and objects which show shadows. People from the Kunstkammer, objects that have been damaged in some way. And I make an exhibition called During the Night. And at the heart of it, I put that great, extraordinary watercolor by Dürer that you know, that amazing image where he wakes up in the middle of the night and sees the heavens descending on him. And he writes this extraordinary text about nightmare, about being scared by the end of the world. So the whole exhibition, the whole archive of brokenness, the whole archive of nighttime in Vienna, and that's an archive of its own. There are many nights in Vienna that you might want to archive. I bring them into a museum. Because what you can do with archives is extraordinary. Because what you're doing with an archive is not holding something close and letting it sit with you as a closed act. You're doing something which is scary and remarkable and courageous. You're taking a bet on the future. You're making something that you cannot control, and you're handing it into the future for other people to understand and make sense of. You're not pretending that you know how everything ends. We cannot. We're human beings. We are fissile and complicated. And you cannot get to the ends of the world of what archives might mean. But you can take the act. You can find the agency of handing something back into the world. And when you're doing that, and I'm going to use the word optimism, which is a word I would like us to have on this scary world and this scary week and this scary night. Optimism. That actually you do not know which generation is going to pick up this image, this poem, this letter, this record, and bring them back together in a new way. Make a new life out of it. The great, wonderful novelist and poet from Alexandria, Andrei Asserman, who wrote a beautiful book, memoir, which we must all read. It's perhaps for sale here in your book.
No, it is, because it's one of our authors. We have
By
published it
tonight, out of Egypt. Amazing book. he talks about a particular mood. He's very good on grammar. He says there's a beautiful word, the irrealis mood, he says. And that's a term in grammar where everything is still possible. Nothing is closed down. Nothing is actually in the past. It is still unfolding now and into the future. And as a maker of pots, a maker of books, a reader of poetry, a talker to people, it's that unfolding in the moment, that irrealis moment, which says that the act of witness, the act of remembering, is in itself a collective act. By remembering, by being in the archive, by caring for the archive, what we're doing is we're bringing together all these generations now and in the future and allowing that agency, that moment of optimism, of creativity to exist. It is das unendliche Stir. It's the unending trace that Rilke talks about, that actually some things just go on. And if we can listen to that and help the people who are making the kinds of places where this is possible, then we're doing the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are an obsessed of archives like Hans and myself, and this is the reason we are all here. Is the foundation was born precisely to create an archive that has evolved until today in different ways. But at the end was the intent, the optimism that we can keep memories together and we can hand over to the next generation. But now I think that we should listen to Hans, and he told me he was uber prepared for this conversation with Edmund, and we are going to focus mainly in the need for the absence of forgotten. No, we have to remember constantly and keep the memories alive. And here we have behind in the third page Bill Sherman, who is the greatest of the greatest in this field, that perhaps you can also intervene in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Elena, and thank you so much, Edmund, and what an amazing talk. I want to also congratulate Elena and Norman on creating this amazing space for books. And when actually Elena gave us a tour before to Edmund and me, we walked from smaller to bigger rooms and could experience all these different rooms here for books. It made me think of Umberto Eco, because many years ago I was in Milan and I visited Umberto Eco in his apartment. He had basically an apartment just for his books. And there was a shelf for the research for every book he did. And then he had a big key in his pocket, which he took out and he opened the door. It was a bit like In the Name of the Rose. And basically we entered this room where there were all these medieval, manuscripts, and it was an extraordinary experience. And he looked at me and he said, we need to create spaces for books. And I think that's what Elena and Norman have been doing here. And I think we should give them a very big round of applause. It's magical.
Thank you.
I was also very moved walking through the space to somehow remember that I met here, thanks to Soledad Lorenzo, a great Spanish artist whom I interviewed in this space called Palazuelo. So that was the memory moment which came
Many
to
years
me,
ago.
and an incredible artist to be remembered. And Edmund, there's so many things I wanted to ask you. First thing, actually, very recently, I spent time in London with the philosopher Roman Kaczarnik, And he talked about the importance of being a good ancestor, but he also talked about short-termism being one of the biggest problems in our time, politically, culturally, in many different ways. And that, in a way, the world needs to liberate itself from this short-term thinking and reconnect to what Brodel would call a longue durée, to kind of get into more long durational kind of ideas. Of course, archives are the perfect tool for that. So I wanted to ask you to maybe this very general question, how we can basically resist short-termism through archives.
Well, I mean, as you say, I mean, the very idea of an archive is in some ways a bulwark. It prevents short-termism, particularly if you can understand that how little you can control archives. I'm looking at you, Elena. I mean, it's extraordinary and enormous. So that actually, you can do so much. You can create a space, an incredible space, to house an archive. You can bring people together to support archives. But actually, all of this is for a generation in advance. This is so. It allows extraordinary things to happen precisely now. But actually, in terms of the creativity, what you're doing with an archive is you're seeding things that you absolutely have no idea what are going to happen next. You have no idea.
It's just an intent
Yeah.
to preserve
Yeah.
history and the present, but
Yeah.
it's an intent only.
Yeah. So the intent is extraordinary, and that's amazing. And so the short-termism, which says that we have to understand what's going to happen just this next year or this next decade, indeed, even those are extraordinary imperatives. We have to think generationally. We absolutely have to think generationally. And so, the spirit of the archive, the spirit of a house of books, which is what you've done, is in some ways a kind of an extraordinary bet on the future. Longue durée. I mean, you got it.
Thank you. And of course, Elena mentioned memory. The first week when I moved to London in 2006, I went to see the late Eric Hobsbawm. And he talked about the necessity of protesting against forgetting. And he said that in our digital age, where we have an exponential growth of information, more and more, already then in 2006, there was an increased need actually to address this amnesia. So I wanted to ask you to maybe comment on this Hobsbawmian idea of a necessary protest against forgetting in this digital age.
Well, I mean, it's a great phrase. I mean, it's an amazing thing to say. I mean, for me, of course, that raises the question about the body and the hand, because it's a profoundly digital age. We're living, so in this extraordinary creative digital space at the moment. But there are, for me, my experience of the world, and I'm afraid I have been waving my hands around for the last half an hour, is profoundly through my hands and my body. And that's a learnt experience. That's decades of making and touching and holding not only objects, but paper and books. And so there is that extraordinary tacit knowledge, that somatic knowledge about how we touch the world. So part of what I fight against, part of what I fight for, in a very evangelical way, as a maker and a writer, is for the spaces where we touch again, where we don't forget what it is to be human beings surrounded by the objects, surrounded by the books that other generations have made and which we now make. So as you came through this incredible bookshop, I'm amazed any of you got here at all. And we'd all a great extraordinary experience of just being stalled there and wanting to pick up one book after another, because each of those books is the opportunity not to forget, is to remember, to go into remembering. And each book, of course, every book is a thing, is an object. And Ivorypress, this miraculous ivory press, for 30 years has allowed artists and writers to make books. And by making books, they're reenacting this wonderful, extraordinary history of mark making, of conversation through word and glyph, through trace, through paper and papyrus, and handprints going
And
all
keeping
the
in
way
the
back.
spine, in the
Yeah, I
spine.
love this, by the way. It's
When,
very good.
his book, Breath, that Soledad Lorenzo, for what gave us the award, the spine, he decided to keep hidden the most extraordinary medieval manuscripts. And can you explain the reason of why?
I'm, as you may know, slightly obsessional. And I bought a collection, thank you, I heard someone laughing in the audience. I bought a collection of medieval binding fragments. In the Middle Ages, when you had a medieval, when in vellum and parchment, if the book wasn't needed anymore, you would cut it up and then you would bind a new book with these fragments. And some of them came up for sale and ridiculously I bought them. And so into the binding of my book, Breath, which is up here in Ivorypress, hidden away, is a piece of medieval illuminated manuscript, bound back into the book. And maybe in 100 years' time, someone will take the book apart.
Yeah.
You know, why
Will be
not?
good.
You know?
But I'm so glad we came to Breast, because that was actually my next question, because I wanted to ask you both to tell us a little bit about this process, because everything really, Edmund, you said brought us to Breast, because we talked about also the materiality, and of course there is in this book porcelain, there is wood, there is gold, there is paper, and it's been an amazing labor of love. The two of you worked on that book for so many months. There are many references to Zurbarán, to Lorca, to Celan, and it would be great to hear from both of you. Maybe we can start with Elena about the process of such a book, because it's like time.
Yeah, it's time and takes time. And we were, I think, almost 5 years
Longer.
courting each other. Mainly I was courting you and trying to focus the intent to do a book that was for him a reflect of his attitude to life, to archives, to books. And it was at the end in San Francisco, in the house of Mimi Haas, who is here, where he told me, I do it, 5 years later. So you remember?
I completely, yes. It was longer than 5. It was a
will
long time.
remember forever.
Yes, yeah.
Because it was a great preparation during 5 years, and it was at the other part of the Atlantic where we make the deal that really we were going to work very seriously in how to develop a book as an homage to Celan, and where you will use your most regarded materials, paper, vellum, kaolin,
Yes.
and
yes.
porcelain, words, and play with them. Also, you wanted to use 3 types of paper
I was
from different locations.
I was quite annoying.
No, you were very precise, very obsessive, very compulsive. It's perfect. It's perfect, no? Because this is
So the great invitation, you know, it's a great lifetime moment when Elena says, "Will you make a book at Ivorypress?" And yes. So the idea was, you know, how many books am I going to make like this in my lifetime? Not many, maybe once. And so really it was absolutely about remembering, actually, Hans. So it's a book where we printed the poems of Celan, this poet who matters enormously to me, and then over the printed words, I used porcelain, liquid porcelain, and just washed liquid porcelain over it. So some of the words come and go, and then rewrote them, and then we used gold. And so what it was doing is to make this, there's a beautiful word, palimpsest. It's a beautiful word, and it means one text on top of another, one kind of writing on top of another. And in many ways, this is a palimpsest. It's me talking to this poet I love, and holding different kinds of memory within a single book. And a palimpsest, of course, is another beautiful word of thinking about archives. You know, how, because, you know, this isn't archives don't belong to the person who creates them. They allow people to not literally write over them, but to re-navigate their way through someone's work, someone's corpus, someone's thinking, someone's philosophy, someone's poetry.
And of course, poetry brings us to the next question, because I think one of the other things which is extraordinary about this book and also about this place here is that it not only brings artists and books together, but also re-establishes strongly that link to poetry, you know, and there are great moments of the avant-gardes of the 20th century. If it's in Dada, if it's a realism, it's the neo-avant-gardes of the 60s, we had this dialogue with poetry, and we need this dialogue again more from the art world to poetry. Now, Edmund, you have an exhibition actually at the moment in Los Angeles in a very special place called the Huntington Art Gallery. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's important to go. It's there until October, I think. It's for a year.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible exhibition where you curated a library of poetry. And it's again, like in your previous project, connected to exile. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so 5 years ago, I made a library of exile, which was
In Venice.
It began at the Venice Biennale, and then it went to Dresden, and then it went to London, and it held 2,000 volumes by people who had been forced into exile, refugees, and in many languages. And the walls of the library were covered in porcelain slip, and that whole structure is now the reading room of the Warburg Library in London.
Thanks to Bill and to you. So if anytime you go to London, I really push you to visit the institute where the Library of Exile is there.
And rather beautifully, all those books, all of which had people sign their name into it. If you were interested in Latvian poetry and your grandmother was Latvian, you wrote your name in it. Wonderful, people wrote all kinds of things, and that whole library is now in the University Library in Mosul. It's in Iraq now. So it's all about diaspora. So for the Huntington, particularly at this extraordinarily difficult, contingent time of alienation and of rejection, we made a small library of writers who had been welcomed to America from all around the world, and this astonishing collection of poetry of people who have made America their home. And again, you can sit in that small library we've made, and you can write your name in books of poetry by an astonishing group of people. We made it, I made a library table which you can sit round, where we have all the names of poets and writers who have been elsewhere, but have America now in their life. And so it turns the tables, because it's talking about home and homelessness, and about welcome, and crucially about the fact that whenever you make a library, whenever you make a bookshop, what you're making is an agora. You're making a public space of conversation.
We use that word, that this will be an agora, where it will be in exchange of ideas, and even if one reader come into the bookshop and confronted with the book. And this is the reason too that this bookstore now is not only focused in art, design and architecture like it was the previous one. This one is an holistic approach, and everything which builds the present and the future in the cities. So you can find the best books in poetry, the best books in political science, in economy, in design, in architecture, in performance arts, in everything that makes a city tick and a human being emotional. No? So
yeah, it's incredibly exciting, and we all
finish.
want to soon spend time with the books. So I won't have many more questions so that we can really go to the books. I have maybe two more questions. Obviously, this idea of exploring the movement of ideas, of people, of objects is something we experience at the Huntington, we can experience it here. But you're also talking about the fragility, you know, of archives, of libraries. And you've been telling me that in our conversation that historically libraries have always been in the firing line. They're very often not only considered to be dangerous, but they're also at risk of disappearing.
Completely. And so I'm very conscious that that on the walls of the library, which is now in the Warburg, which I finished 7 years ago, that if I come back to it, I have to write many, many more libraries that have been destroyed. You know, Kharkiv, Gaza, amongst them. You know, and God help us by the end of this week, what cultural sites have been destroyed. So you know, there is an enormous. The reality is that people in power hate libraries because they are places of
Some people.
not you.
Some people.
Historically, libraries are because they're dangerous, because that's where ideas become.
No, it's true. There a book here that you can see downstairs in a area devoted to the artist books, done by Saiwa San, and it's called Suicide. And I said, but why you are doing this book? I said, because a book can kill you and kill itself. And he developed a book and created a book that just only touching some areas of the book explodes. So downstairs and kill you. So downstairs you have a video with the book that he create to demonstrate precisely as a metaphor that the book can kill you and can kill societies. No? So is what you say.
Yeah,
but
you've
translated to a
Yes.
artist book.
Yes, I mean you absolutely have to understand how central libraries are. You know, as places of danger. That's why
Has
they
been.
exist. That's why they exist.
I have one last question,
Last,
one for
because I think
promise,
we need a little
one
bit of
for
champagne.
Elena, one for Edmund. Actually, Elena, I wanted to ask you because we are here in an extraordinary archive, but what you do is you connect this archive to many other archives in the world. I mean, you already mentioned, you know, the Warburg, but you connect, you're doing books with conversations about different archives. Can you talk a little bit about how this is also about a network of archives?
Yeah, years ago, many years ago, Norman and I, we did a tour through what we thought were the most key archives in the world. We went from Canada to Germany to China to different countries and continents. And we discovered that some of them, they were not exactly well cared, and also another ones were forgotten. Another ones were well cared, but with certain without passion for pursuing the main thing that the archives done, which is to keep the history alive and pass over and hand over to the new generation. And this was the beginning of the archives of the Norman Foster Foundation, that not only keeps the drawings, the thousands of drawings of Norman, but also another architects and photographers now. And so we are trying to create a very open archive for the future. And in Ivorypress the same. We have a quite big archive, which is in another building 20 minutes from here, which is devoted to all the books, every photography, every correspondence that we have had with all the artists and every artisan. So that will be for new generations to consult if they want. So it's our way to create this kind of protest that you talked before against forgetting.
And also the future. You mentioned the future, and of course the future often is also invented with programs from the past. And that leads me to the last question for Edmund, because of course, we're also curious to hear what you're working on next. And it has again to do with this idea that you actually develop an extraordinary project based on an archive. Can you tell us about his Rilke correspondence and then also How to Begin, which is basically a double publication?
I think you put it in a certain, he told you that he didn't want to talk about
He
it.
said he
okay.
might,
But
he might.
Entre nous. So on Tuesday night, I handed in a new book, which is going to come out at the end of this year. So it's a strange story, bear with me. In 1921, my grandmother, Elizabeth, who I loved, she was living in Vienna, she was a young poet, wrote a poem and she sent it to Rilke, the great poet Rilke. And he wrote back. And for 5 years, they had a correspondence, backwards and forwards, sending poems and translations and books to each other. And it's never been published. This Letters to a Young Poet ×2. And then my grandmother wrote poems and letters to me when I was a young, trying to be a poet. And so what I've done is to write a book called How to Begin, which is really about optimism. It's about what it is to begin your creative life, how you find a mentor, how you survive being mentored, and also how to end. So it's a book about creativity. And so this book has the complete correspondence between Elizabeth and Rilke for the first time, but it's also me meditating really on beginnings, which is rather a wonderful thing to share with you tonight, when there's so many beginnings.
So many beginnings. We are
you make
constantly
lots of
beginning. So we want to thank you, Hans and Edmund, for being here. Thank you also to all of you. And I think now, if you mingle a little bit, some invisible hands are going to take away all the chairs, all the benches, and we are going to celebrate us, for us and for the future and for the fight to those who wants to forget the past and to celebrate the future and with optimism, as you said, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Muchísimas gracias.